Hey, what's going on, you guys? It's Aces High. Today we're going to get back into some Caesar, some Roman, all that type of stuff. And this is something that actually I didn't know at all about Caesar. Like I said, I don't know too much about Rome and about Caesar, but it's titled Caesar in Britannica and Germania. Um, I didn't know he went that high. Did their borders used to be much larger, or, I mean, I guess I'll learn in this video. But I have decided to swap back over to Kings and Generals because a lot of people are asking for Kings and Generals. They're saying they like their it a little bit more, and more, and also that Historia Civilis has done up through the Civil War. So after Caesar gets killed, we'll swap back over to Historia Civilis, and yeah, we should be good with that. Anyway, I'm gonna sit back, shut up. Make sure you hit that sub button, help me out, and let's get started.
Gaius Julius Caesar's campaign in Gaul was a resounding success, with many decisive victories allowing him to conquer vast territory, making him rich and powerful. However, the political situation both in Rome and Gaul, coupled with Caesar's ambition, didn't allow him to sit idle, and the general would become the first Roman to invade Germania and Britannia. This video is sponsored by Imperator Rome, the newest historical grand strategy game from Paradox Interactive. Build a glorious empire out of blood and marble. Take the reins of power over any of hundreds of ancient nations, including Rome and Carthage, and build roads and command war. Enjoy in the description.
Wow, okay, that's a game that I gotta check out. Seriously, that sounds like fun.
By 56 BC, Caesar had subjugated the majority of Gaul, either through conquest or political alliances, and was beginning to look for new opportunities to expand Rome's influence. But not all the Gallic tribes were taking kindly to Roman rule. One such tribe was the Veneti, located in modern Brittany.
I guess, and I know you guys are going to call me out on this, I guess that I did end up skipping a little bit of the series when I swapped over. The last video I watched was 57 BC, so I didn't think I really skipped much, but I guess I did because when we left off, Caesar was kind of right along here, you know? So I guess he pushed up a little more.
Despite signing a peace treaty with Caesar the year before, they reneged on this promise and captured a few Roman officers. As a largely seafaring nation, the Veneti were confident that they would be able to put their faith in their navy and force Caesar to make concessions. However, Caesar spent no time trying to negotiate, instead seeing the act as a direct declaration of war, and marched on the tribe. Initially, he found...
I mean, I don't blame him. If you take the officers like that when you were signed up for a treaty, like, what do you expect is going to happen, you know?
Little success. Due to their large navy, the Veneti were able to effectively hop from town to town, moving entire populaces and their belongings, denying the Romans a pitched battle or siege. Standard Roman tactics proved ineffective therefore, and it was clear that, in order to win, Caesar had to defeat the navy. With no navy on hand, he ordered that a fleet be built in order to take on the Veneti navy. But compared to the Roman ships, which were designed for the Mediterranean, the Veneti ships, designed for the Atlantic, were much stronger and taller, and the Romans found them impossible to ram or board. It was only through the ingenuity of one of his legates, Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus, who suggested that they use billhooks to cut down the sails and cripple the Veneti boats, that Caesar was able to defeat their navy. With this issue sorted, it now seemed that Caesar...
Is that the Brutus that is the famous Brutus that supposedly that was the last thing he said? I mean, I'm still having trouble buying that. We'll get into all that later. Everybody knows that story. But is that the same Brutus?
That would be able to move on to new conquests. Once again though, his plans were put on hold in 55 BC, when yet another roaming German horde, composed of Usipetes and Tenchtheri, began threatening the Rhine border. These tribes previously rivaled the Suebi, but were now fleeing in huge numbers. Caesar giving their total number, including civilians, as 430,000. They had already slaughtered the Menapii and stolen their ships in order to cross the river, and were now pouring into Gaul. Upon hearing about this, Caesar was once again compelled to act, as he was worried that the Gauls might join the Germans in an attempt to oust the Romans. Some Gallic tribes in the Rhine Valley had indeed sent emissaries to the Germans, providing them with food and intelligence, encouraging them to move deeper into Gaul. Caesar gathered a council of Gallic chiefs, and convinced them to provide more cavalry for him to confront the Germans. This served two purposes.
Do you think that he convinced them, or he convinced them? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, do you think he kind of forced them to give up soldiers, or do you think they actually voluntarily did it?
Firstly, Rome's cavalry had always been lacking, and the Gauls were renowned horsemen, and so filled a crucial role in the army. And secondly, because cavalry was composed largely of nobles or wealthy persons, they would act as hostages, ensuring good behaviour. He then gathered 5 of his legions and headed to the Rhine. The Germans had sent a portion of their cavalry ahead of their main force in order to carry out raiding missions, but hearing that Caesar was getting close, they sent emissaries in order to delay him. They asked Caesar to negotiate, claiming that they were only in Gaul because they had been forced to flee from the Suebi, and promised to ally with Rome if Caesar could provide them with land in Gaul. However, Caesar suspected that the Germans were delaying and continued his advance.
That's smart. It seems like Caesar always just kind of sees through the plans that his enemies make. I see a lot of things in Caesar that I also saw in Napoleon, you know, that make great military leaders.
The envoys continued back and forth as Caesar continued to progress towards the German camp, sending forward his 5,000 cavalry as an advanced force, but with orders not to provoke them into attack. However, upon seeing the Roman cavalry separated from the main force, the Germans fell upon them. The Romans initially tried to hold their ground, but were eventually overwhelmed and retreated to the safety of Caesar's camp. Caesar likely underplays the amount of casualties taken, giving the number as 74, but he does mention that 2 brothers of the famous and influential Piso family had died in the fighting, something that Caesar could not let go unpunished. Refusing to hold back any longer, Caesar gathered his force to attack the Germans. But before he moved off, the Germans sent a party of diplomats, including high-ranking nobility, to treat with Caesar, once again asking for peace and apologizing for the attack. As the Germans had already attacked apparently without provocation, Caesar refused and took the delegates as prisoners. He then drew up his army in 3 lines and moved swiftly to the German camp. The Germans, assuming that Caesar still would have been delayed by their envoys, were caught completely unaware.
Oh, because I guess since he took them as a prisoner, they never got a chance to go back and, you know, let him know Caesar said no. Okay, wow. So they caught him still sleeping in their tents, I guess.
The legions fell upon their camp. Caesar brushes over the details, but it seems to have been somewhat of a massacre. The fleeing Germans were pursued by the Roman cavalry. Some made it across the river in their boats, but many tried to swim across and drowned. Hearing of the defeat, the German cavalry, which had been pillaging, returned across the Rhine. Caesar's army had taken minimal casualties. It is important to note that while Caesar portrayed this as a great victory against a marauding Germanic horde, this is not how others saw it. To Caesar's political rivals in Rome, Caesar had broken the armistice with the Germans by antagonizing them with his cavalry, imprisoned.
I mean, I think that's true. Let's be real. I think that's exactly what Caesar was trying to do, so that he could use any excuse.
Diplomats, which was effectively a declaration of war, and then carried out a massacre, including civilians. Caesar needed something to distract the Senate and win the minds of the people, so he decided to boost his popularity by doing what no Roman general had ever done before: crossing the Rhine. The Germanic tribe Ubii offered its ships, hoping that the Romans would assist in their war against the Suebi. Caesar, however, deemed this unworthy of the Roman people, and instead decided to build a bridge across the Rhine between modern Andernach and Neuwied.
Maybe it's just that, I don't know, maybe it's just that I've watched a lot of videos in the area, like the Napoleonic Wars, Caesar, just different things. But the Rhine seems like an incredibly famous river. I keep on hearing about it. And the crazy part is, like, I heard about it back in the day. I knew where it was. It's, in my mind, it's like almost as famous as the Nile and everything, It's just interesting.
It was an engineering marvel. The legion's engineers used winches to act as pile drivers, driving stakes deep into the river, and constructed the 140 to 400 meter by 7 to 9 meter bridge in just 10 days.
Wow.
Caesar found the lands beyond the Rhine almost deserted. Taken aback by the Roman speed and their feat of engineering, the Germanic tribes in the area had retreated deep into the Germanic forests, where they had amassed a significant army. However, Caesar had no desire to be caught in a prolonged campaign in foreign territory against a notoriously dangerous enemy. He spent just 18 days on the German side of the Rhine, burning villages and crop fields before returning and dismantling the bridge. The campaign was a proof, not only to the Germans but also to Caesar's rivals in Rome, that he could overcome anything and do as he pleased. Caesar's next ambition, Britain, was once again a perfect propaganda target. The island was on the edge of the known world and rumoured to be a land of monsters and vast riches. It had remained.
Wow, yeah, okay. Going to Britannica. Or Britannia, I guess. Yeah, going to Britain. But it's just interesting. I wonder if I don't think he takes any of that. I don't know. Like, I guess I just don't know enough about the Caesar, like, history in Rome at the time, but I really don't think that becomes part of Rome.
Remained effectively untouched, and bringing it into Rome's sphere of influence would be a significant achievement. According to Caesar, the Britons had provided some of the Gallic tribes with the resources needed to make war. While this was a weak casus belli, Caesar was, by now, effectively doing what he wanted with little oversight. He began gathering intel from the Gallic merchants and sent a small reconnaissance force to the island, whilst he mustered the ships he used against the Veneti and prepared to cross with the 7th and 10th Legion. He set sail from modern Calais and safely made it across with most of his army, but his cavalry had been delayed by bad weather. The Romans saw the Britons had amassed along the White Cliffs of Dover in huge numbers, with infantry, cavalry and chariots, and with every warrior painted in fierce blue war paint.
Wow. See, that's the place you need to show up at, the Cliffs of Dover. It would just be so intimidating to look up and see all of them up there,
Caesar moved further down the coast in order to find a better place to land, but was shadowed by the Britons' cavalry and chariots, who were easily able to keep pace with the fleet. When the Romans finally found a suitable beach, Caesar arranged his transport vessels into a long line with his warships on his flanks and ordered his men to disembark. As the transport vessels had deep keels, however, they were still some way from the shore, and the legions were forced to wade in waist-deep in water to try and reach the beach.
Oh, wow.
The Britons saw their opportunity and attacked, firing missiles into the ranks of the legionnaires as they struggled through the water, weighed down by their armour. The Briton cavalry charged in and out of the Romans, the height advantage of being on horseback allowing them to fight much more effectively than the Romans stuck in the water. The legionaries were taking significant casualties, and seeing this, Caesar moved his shallower-keeled warships up the flanks so that his missile troops and ballistae could fire into the Britons' sides. Still, the legions were wavering, with some men not even being willing to get off their transports. It was not until an eagle-bearer of the 10th Legion leapt into the water and waded towards the Britons that the legions rallied and rejoined the battle in earnest. The fighting was fierce and contested, with the Romans gathering to their nearest standards to try and maintain some form of cohesion, while Caesar...
An eagle bearer. So is that the same? Is that generally where Napoleon got his eagles from? Same type of thing, same type of honor, I guess. From way back in ancient Roman times. Do those have any connection at all?
Caesar used rowing boats to ferry men from the transports to areas where the Roman front line looked to be in danger. Finally, the Romans were able to push through the shallows onto the beach, where their organization and heavy armor could come into play, at which point the Britons broke off and retreated. Caesar, without any cavalry, had no choice but to let them escape. We don't know the numbers of dead on either side, but being a contested landing, it's likely that the Roman losses were greater. Following the battle, the Romans established a camp on the beach, and the Britons sent delegates to sue for peace, probably to assess the Romans' purpose in the area. They were on home ground and could afford to wait to see what Caesar's next move would be, whereas Caesar, with no supply line, would be pressured to make the first move.
Right.
Caesar accepted the peace, and the Britons sent a small number of hostages, promising more later. The cavalry that had been waylaid did try and cross once again to meet Caesar, but were caught in a storm and forced to turn back. This same storm damaged the ships that Caesar had anchored off the beach, demoralizing the Romans, who could no longer escape the island. Salvaging what materials he could from the most damaged ships, Caesar began repairs. He sent one legion at a time to forage for food, whilst the others defended the camp on the beach. However, whilst one of the legions was out foraging, the camp watch reported seeing dust on the horizon moving their way. This, combined with the lack of the promised extra hostages, was enough to alert Caesar to what was happening. He gathered 2 cohorts and marched quickly to the legion's location. Whilst foraging, the legion had been ambushed. Scattered and focused on collecting food, the Britons had been able to kill a substantial number of them in the initial attack.
Wow.
The legion had managed to regain some level of discipline, snatching up their weapons, but they were surrounded by the British cavalry and chariots. British charioteers were trained to throw missiles from their chariots and then dismount to fight on foot, before hopping back on the chariot when the fighting got too hard in order to regroup. This gave them the staying power of infantry and mobility of cavalry, a tactic Caesar admired, but was now taking a heavy toll on the surrounded legion.
Wow.
Upon Caesar's arrival with his cohorts in formation, the cavalry and chariots retreated.
Thing is, how strong were those wheels at the time, on the chariots? Because you can't go over that rough of terrain with them, right? It's not like a modern-day wheel.
The Britons had no desire to fight heavy infantry in formation in a pitched battle without their own infantry support, and allowed the legion to withdraw to camp with Caesar. However, bolstered by this success, the Britons amassed their full force of infantry, cavalry and chariots and marched on the camp. Caesar drew out his legions to meet them. So far, he had been fighting in difficult circumstances, in water, in ambushes, against a highly mobile enemy, but this was an ideal situation for the Romans, where their formations and discipline could truly make a difference. The Britons charged, but in these conditions, the Romans had a significant advantage. Whilst the chariots and cavalry had proved highly effective against small groups of Roman infantry, with the legions in a cohesive line, they now had little effect. The Britons quickly caught on to this fact and disengaged, their chariots and cavalry leaving the battlefield. the Roman infantry was now able to surge forward and catch a portion of the Briton infantry, routing it completely.
A good
The
portion
Britons
of
were
them.
excellent at hit-and-run tactics and ambushes, but in set-piece battles, the Romans were far superior. Once again, the Britons sent a peace delegation, and Caesar, knowing that his options were limited and that he did not have enough resources to carry out a full campaign, accepted and then hastily withdrew from the island during the night. However, on his way back to Gaul, 2 ships were blown off course in a storm. 300 Romans were stranded and surrounded by a Belgae tribe, the Morini, who Caesar had only recently subjugated and were keen for spoils and revenge. The Romans were assailed from all sides with missiles in hit-and-run attacks against their small group. Caesar caught wind of this and gathered as much cavalry as he could to personally lead them to the men's rescue, managing to ride down the Gauls and save the Romans with only minimal casualties.
Wow.
Labienus would later be sent into the
I feel like that had to be a serious morale booster for the people who just came in and got saved. The windstorm screwed you, you landed the wrong spot, you're surrounded by the enemy, you're gonna get killed. Suddenly your commander comes riding in on a horse with all these other cavalry, and they just save your ass, you know? It would definitely build my morale, and it would build my loyalty to Caesar.
Belgae territory to winter there and reinforce Roman rule in the area. Neither the invasion of Britain nor this foray into Belgae territory were significant military achievements. However, they show why Caesar was so loved by his men. He was brave, achieving things no Roman had ever done before. He was calm under pressure, and most importantly, he would lead from the front and showed that he cared for his soldiers and was prepared to risk his life to save them.
I agree completely. That's what I was just saying.
The Britain campaign had not achieved much for the Romans, but it did provide Caesar with crucial knowledge about the Britons' military, the climate, and the level of preparation that he would need to succeed, lessons he would learn from for next year. Moreover, the Roman public and Senate were amazed by his feat of crossing the Channel into unknown territories, and a full 20 days of Thanksgiving were declared to recognize his achievement.
Wow.
The history of the Celtic people is often forgotten when talking about Roman conquest, so we decided to remedy this situation by recording a new podcast talking about the history.
Okay, I think that's about it. They're just going to talk about their podcast a little bit. First off, I had no idea that Caesar ever stepped foot into what is now Britain. Just straight up, I had zero idea. And it didn't go the best for him, but it didn't go bad. It's interesting. And then, of course, holding off the Germans, that's interesting too, because, I mean, for a very long time, they've been known, especially way back then, like they said, they've been known as a tougher opponent. So, I don't know. Anyway, hope you guys stick around till next time. This is Aces High, and I'm out.